Welcome and thank you for joining the Elevate and Empower event today. My name is Simone Conforto. I am your technical producer for today's event. If you run into any trouble at all, please feel free to use the chat feature to contact me directly. Please, if you could, use the thumbs up reaction to let us know that you can hear. Fantastic. So the Elevate and Empower Spotlight on Leadership and Learning series aims to enhance the skills and knowledge of the VBA's leaders and aspiring leaders at various grade levels through monthly training sessions. So before we get started today, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping notes. So as always, today's event is being recorded. Please note that your microphone should be muted by default when you logged in. However, you're certainly encouraged to type comments and questions into the chat. All questions that are asked will be answered throughout the event and at the end of the event. Live captioning is enabled in Teams, so you can click on the More Actions button, which is the three dots at the top of your screen. Then you can click on the language and speech options, select Turn on Live Captions, select English, and then click on Confirm. And finally, your feedback is super important to us here in the Learning and Development Division. So at the conclusion of today's event, we will be sharing a link to a brief survey for you. We would love to hear what you think about today's event. So at this time, I'd like to introduce our speaker. That is Miss Elizabeth Pravat. She is a Learning Management Officer here in the Learning and Development Division of the Office of Human Capital Services. So, Ms. Pravat, we are honored that you are with us today, and the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Simone, for that introduction. And thank you all for being here. As Simone said, my name is Elizabeth Pravat, and I have had the privilege to be with the agency for going on 19 years now. And throughout that time, have had a variety of positions where knowledge management has really been instrumental in either making or breaking the goals and projects and assignments that my teams have been working on. So I want to kind of kick off today's topic with just acknowledgement that this subject of knowledge management can seem a little bit dry, can seem a little bit boring. But what I want you to really kind of get out of today's lesson is that how important it is as a foundational step and a foundational activity that you can do to not only set up yourself for success when it comes to staying on top of your organizational skills with your resources and your references, but also it really helps the collectivity of the team and the individuals that you work with. So I wanted to kind of get a pulse from the audience here. And I know I can't be alone when I say that I've felt overwhelmed in the digital space when it comes to keeping up with different SharePoint locations, reference material, project plans, particularly when it is a shared digital space, whether between a team or a division or even potentially a larger group that digital space is shared with. So let me know in the chat if about a specific challenge that you've experienced, whether individually or as part of a group, when it comes to capturing knowledge or locating existing material to help you navigate how you get your job done or navigate where did I save that email that I knew I wanted to come back to, but I can't quite find it. So let me know what kind of struggles have you faced in the past or are you currently facing when it comes to managing your knowledge and the collective knowledge of your work group. And while those examples are coming into the chat, I'll go ahead and read some of them off. So standard operating procedures with active and updated links. That's a huge one. I know we love embedded links for the convenience of just being able to click through. But if at any point the folder system that link is connecting you to gets renamed or relocated, that link doesn't work anymore. And then that kind of really takes a lot of that convenience out of there. All right, Michael is saying that his team's biggest stressor is system downtime. Oh, that can be a huge impact if the system upon which your knowledge is stored, you can't access it, yeah, that's absolutely going to put a delay in getting things done. And let's see, Irene is saying trying to locate resources, um, saving training videos to refer back to. So kind of creating that repository that you can easily navigate and get to that information, because accessing the information timely is absolutely critical when it comes to being able to get your work done. All right, I'm seeing a lot of struggles coming into the chat, and I can definitely relate to many of them. And so we've got something about which SharePoint, because I know it seems like sometimes when there's turnover within a team, somebody doesn't know about an old SharePoint, so somebody new comes along and creates a new SharePoint, and now we've got redundant information out there, and that is absolutely problematic. And then Cecilia's makes a good point here about sometimes there's one person with knowledge, and they don't document that when they leave. We're going to touch on that today, because with so many personnel changes we've experienced as of late, that's definitely come to light in just speaking with my peers. So how can we stay on top of that? Okay, not having access to training resources. Yes, if the training is out there, but you don't have access to that information, not doing you much good, is it? All right. And then OneNote sync abilities, access denied. Okay, I haven't heard of that issue, but let's kind of, I noticed that we have a somewhat of a smaller group here today. So towards the end of the session, I think we'll have time to kind of open up our mics, and maybe we can crowdsource some solutions here. If you've got a problem you've been running into and you just want to see if others have faced similar issues and what solutions they've come to, this is a great forum for us to put our heads together and hopefully come up with some solutions. So thank you so much for everybody who put their thoughts out there in the chat about some struggles that you've been facing. I think it's helpful to kind of have that in mind as we go into the content. So, you can have something concrete that really connects to the work that you do, and then you can use that issue, that problem, and maybe walk through some potential solutioning with the content we're going to talk through today. So with that, let's talk about our training objectives. So after today's session, you'll be able to explain the practice of knowledge management, because I want us to all be on the same page. What do we mean when we're talking about knowledge management? And not only that, but then it gives you a framework of how to explain this to others who might have saw the topic of this course and said, that doesn't seem like it applies to me, but you, with this information, you're now empowered to explain that to others and really dig into it yourself. So let's get the basics underway. Next up, discuss the benefits of knowledge management as it relates to individuals and teams. And then lastly, we'll discover some knowledge management practices that you'll be able to apply today. All right, so any questions before we get moving? Like Simone said at the start, you are welcome to put your comments, questions into the chat throughout. I will have my eyes on the chat to respond to those as they come in, but I have also asked Simone if I missed something, she might pop on to call this to my attention. So appreciate your engagement throughout. It'll be a lot more beneficial of our time together if you are engaged and reacting, responding, asking those questions if you have them. So thank you for that. All right. So I'm not seeing any questions at the moment. We'll proceed into our first topic, which is that basic question I mentioned. What is knowledge management? So knowledge management is a systematic process of creating, sharing, using, and managing the knowledge and information of an organization. And I bolded the word systematic on the slide here because it is important to really take that holistic view when it comes to managing this type of information. And so I know the target audience here is for our emerging leaders. So you might not be in a supervisory role and you might feel like you don't have a lot of control over how things get done. So if that's you right now, I would encourage you to start with yourself and your own organizational system, because even that is an area where you might lose a little bit of time in your day searching for things within your OneDrive, for example, or your Outlook inbox. So even if you don't yet have the ability to influence your team at a larger scale, you can start applying these practices to your own information and knowledge management for your personal resources. And then what I would further encourage you to do is, start talking to your peers, talk to your teammates and ask about what they're doing. And, it's really, as we'll see as we progress through the topic, if we can get the whole team on board in specific kind of conventions of how things are accomplished, that's really when we start rocking and rolling with our organization, with finding resources and locating and sharing information. So I just wanted to kind of frame that up here as well, because it is a systematic process, but you might be starting within a smaller system when it comes to your own personal resources. And then as time progresses, you can expand that knowledge and those best practices to your peers and maybe even a team of your own as you progress through the leadership ranks. So the goal, going over to the right-hand side of the slide here, the goal of knowledge management is to improve an organization's efficiency, decision-making capabilities, and innovation by leveraging its collective knowledge and intellectual assets. So again, really getting everyone on the same page with how things get done when we're talking about that big picture knowledge management, and making sure that when we have that turnover amongst our peers or amongst our leadership ranks, we don't have to reinvent the process every single time, because we've done such a great job at getting those steps documented from the start, and we are all on the same page. So that is the definition of knowledge management itself. Let's move on now and talk about the different types of knowledge. I think this was really eye-opening when I first read about these categories, because I never really had a way to name these things that I was recognizing and seeing within the workplace and among my peers about the types of information that was going around. And this gives us a vocabulary that we can apply it to. So first up, we have tacit knowledge. So tacit knowledge is something that an individual acquires through personal experience. And it's really, this type of knowledge is challenging to express using words, both spoken and written. So I'll give an example here of, and this is going to take us way back to the days of MAPD before VBMS was around. But when I was a claims processor first starting out, there was a program called MAPD that we had to use to send letters to veterans and all of that. And there was a weird quirk in that computer system where sometimes it would get stuck in this loop of like the buttons would just keep flashing back and forth. And as a claims processor, I was like, what is going on here? And, someone had to like kind of come over and show me, or I think I maybe figured it out myself. Like you had to very quickly, like click one of the buttons at just the right time to get it out of that loop. And it wasn't something that was in an SOP. It wasn't something that I learned in challenge or new claims processor training. It was just something that I knew from experience. And that wasn't something that was worthy of putting into a user manual, because really it shouldn't have been happening. It was kind of an issue with the system. But I had that information now because I had experienced it. And then at a point when I was training someone on the system, it happened to them. And I had to show them and explain them what the workaround was. And they were like, this is bizarre. And I was like, yes, I know it's bizarre. But so then this was tacit knowledge because it wasn't documented anywhere. And it would have been strange to have that documented. But that's the type of knowledge that existed that would fall into this tacit category. So looking at the slide here, you can see I've got an arrow going from left to right. And really our goal is to get to the far hand side where most every bit of knowledge is explicit, where it's really out there. But unfortunately, a lot of things get stuck in this middle category, this implicit knowledge category, which is information that comes from understanding and experience that's often acquired by working on the job, by kind of being shown the ropes, so to speak. So you're a new employee who's just walked onto a team, and that those first few weeks, you're generally spending time shadowing somebody, and they're showing you what to do, and that's um, a very common way of getting somebody up to speed with how things are done. And in a lot of those instances, those processes about, okay, here's where we store all of our, shared documents. That's not really called out in a SOP in many instances. It's just something that people show one another. And in some cases, it's out of convenience that we get stuck here in this middle category, this implicit knowledge category, because you know what, proper documentation and updating of those resources, that takes time, and that takes explicit dedication to make sure you monitor those and update them as processes change, as missions change. And so because we unfortunately lose sight of those more time-consuming activities, we stay here in this implicit knowledge world where all of the information about how we get work done is just passed down through like shadowing or oral introduction, so to speak. It's like, oh, I was wondering about this new process that our team that, I just got a new assignment from the boss. How do we do this? Oh, we need to go talk to so-and-so. They're the ones who know how to do that, versus saying, oh, we have an SOP that explains exactly how that gets done. So I hope that illustrates the difference on implicit knowledge. Yes, thanks, Carrie, for that agreement and for recognizing that what I have is observed myself. So moving on to the far right-hand side of explicit knowledge. So this is knowledge that is a knowledge holder. So whomever has that information, they write it down, they document it, and they create a clear and thorough method for others to come behind them and obtain that same knowledge. And as such, they can execute a process in a similar fashion as was originally intended. So this is like the gold standard. This is what we want. But like I mentioned, for the reasons about convenience, about competing priorities, a lot of the times the breadth of what a team might do isn't always captured in an explicit format. And so that's where we kind of get ourselves into trouble with losing information or reinventing processes that were already in place, but we never pass those down to new employees, for example. So thinking about these different types of knowledge, I would like to hear from the group about what different bodies of knowledge do you work with at VBA that directly impact the work that you do, and you have found crucial to making your job uh, successful. Okay, so Maria is saying standard operating procedures. I would agree that that's definitely a very common document that we use at VBA, getting things documented like how to submit leave requests, or in my team, we have an SOP about how to develop training, for example. Okay, someone's talking about the manual. So we absolutely have a lot of technical manuals throughout VBA when it comes to doing things like processing disability claims, or working with veterans in the VRE program, or education claims. So all of that comes back to the regulations and job aids. I'm seeing that as well. The knowledge management portal. So that's a big thing. I know that was rolled out a few years ago, and that is a great example of working to collect all of the knowledge in a centralized location for specifically for compensation processing. And so that is a great tool to collect all of those resources. Okay, and Charles is saying that in the past, they had GS9s that had folders, and they were the SMEs. And then if you could catch them between breaks, they could pull the folder off a shelf, flip to the regulation and policy section and show you what was required. But now we find it on a web page. And absolutely, that's just a great reminder of kind of how things have transitioned over time. We used to be such a paper-based organization. I know when I first started with VBA, I had a paper rating schedule, and then there were some raters who had been around a lot longer than that, and they were telling me about how memos used to be issued from the front office, and we would have to wait for a manual update for multiple months before it would trickle down. But now it's more instantaneous when we can get an update overnight to our electronic manual. Okay, I'm seeing some other great comments in the chat, community of practice chat rooms, and that is fantastic as far as sharing knowledge, asking one another where resources are. And I would put that firmly in the category of implicit knowledge, because those are fantastic resources, like I said, but unless you then take the knowledge you collect from your peers and put it in a formal fashion, it's not set up in that formal way. And might be something to consider, like, what am I constantly going to these chat rooms to ask, and what might we need to make more well known so that everybody has access to this information? All right, great comments here. Okay, Carrie's pointing out that the Your IT portal has a robust knowledge management portal too. So might be a place to look for inspiration about how to get some things set up and organized for your purposes. And then let's see, Maria uses OneNote very often, which she updates according to the manual and other guidance. That is a fantastic tool. That'll highlight in a bit about how to get your own resources organized. So great on you for getting that set up. All right, BA handbooks, procedural guidelines, lesson plans. All right, great input here about some bodies of knowledge that you are already working with. So again, just wanting to get you thinking about where you're seeing this information, and take the topic that came to your mind and try to categorize it here. Is it explicit? Is it implicit? Or is it tacit? And try to think, if it's tacit or implicit, is there a way that we can make it more explicit, so that again everybody has a streamlined way to access it and know where it is. Okay, so we've talked about knowledge management, what it is. We talked about the different types of knowledge. Now we're going to talk about some components that make up the process of knowledge management to really help you understand how does knowledge come together, and what steps might you need to strengthen in your processes or in your team's processes to really create a strong knowledge management system. So first up, we have knowledge creation. And knowledge creation is generating new insights, ideas, or routines that contribute to the organization's knowledge base. These come about through research, innovation, learning, and from experience. So I want to recognize that a lot of, so many technical resources were named off in the previous input that you all provided. And so sometimes the creation of knowledge, it's just handed to us. And, that's just the way it is. And just a matter of recognizing how does knowledge come about, and understanding that, okay, if a law changes, we're going to get new knowledge, and we have to manage that, and we have to integrate it into our processes. So that's just kind of the way it is for some of the knowledge creation if you're in one of the more technical roles. On the other hand, if you're in maybe like a project management role, or a less technical type of role, you might get some knowledge creation through like experience. Just like if a new process comes out, you have to figure it out, and then you say, okay, well, now at this point, let's put this process down on paper, and we can create an SOP. So you have a little bit more say and input into how that knowledge is created. Next up, we have knowledge storage and or retrieval. So this is storing knowledge in a structured format so that it can be retrieved easily, keyword there. And this can include databases, document management systems, and other forms of electronic storage. So we had some great ideas so far in the chat about how people store their own information. I saw shared drives. I saw OneNote. So those are great methods for getting yourself organized to share to collect knowledge and organize it for yourself. And what I mean by this isn't necessarily like copying and pasting a whole manual reference into a new location. It could simply just be a matter of creating a topic index for yourself where you paste the actual reference number so that you can then navigate to that location on the knowledge management portal, for example. And so it's just a way to collect, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but like a knowledge map to map out where information is. So you know, like which SharePoint was that, or which Teams channel was that I was on a few weeks ago, because there are so many of them, and so it can get to be a little much. All right, and so I see some comments in the chat here, and someone mentioned feedback as a type of knowledge. And I agree that that is definitely an input into this entire process. And feedback can absolutely allow you to improve your processes, change the way that you do things. So yes, absolutely, feedback can be instrumental in our processes. Okay, and then another system, some folks are saying Excel sheets, shared drives that are tied to data, or SharePoints rather, tied to databases with Python would be fantastic. Oh, you're making a suggestion. Okay. Yes, I don't know that we have access to all of that, but you know, if we have the skill set and abilities to do something um, more technical and robust, you know, speak with your leadership, see if that's something that you can get rolling, get that talent fostered among your team, and put something in place that is more systematic. That would be really great. All right. So that is knowledge storage and retrieval. Next up, we have knowledge sharing. So this is, again, thinking about knowledge management from like a team perspective versus an individual perspective. Knowledge sharing is really a huge part of a successful knowledge management plan, because if you have a bit of information about maybe a point of contact changed in one of your processes, but you keep that information to yourself, and so everybody on your team has to go through the process to figure that out, that there's a new point of contact now, you know, that's really, you know, not efficient. And that type of gatekeeping can just delay things overall. And uh, it's just something to consider is how well does the information that impacts a team get shared. So when we're talking about the definition of knowledge sharing, that is distributing knowledge within the organization, which can be done through meetings, intranet sites, knowledge repositories, or collaborative tools. So let me know in the chat, have you ever experienced a situation where you were the last one to be informed on a particular topic or new practice? Um, I know I've been there before, and it's not a good feeling to feel like, did everybody already know about this? And like, I'm the last one, like nobody thought to bring this up at a team meeting, or, you know, we didn't have a group chat of peers to like say, hey, oh, by the way, I learned this new process today, or I found this new reference today that's really been helpful. Um, or maybe you kind of thought that maybe you were the person, again, who withheld some information, and you didn't do it intentionally or maliciously, but you maybe thought other people already knew and so you didn't share. And so sometimes I think that with knowledge sharing, um, um, it's better to just double check that other people got the message versus assuming that everybody got the same message that you did. Um, and that's, of course, not if like we were all in the same meeting and we heard the same information. Obviously, all of your peers heard that same information. Um, but it's just something to think about. How does that work within your team and with the different processes that your team works with? Um, okay, so Sharon says that she's often coming across as the one that is the last to know, thanks to a technique from her mom. that you will learn so much from that one, and being transparent about that works. So, and yeah, sometimes unfortunately we just are the last one to know, and it's not necessarily something to take personally, but it could be a reason to start asking questions about how information is distributed. And so thinking about like, well, could this have been brought up at a team meeting in a different way so that we all got the same message rapidly? Um, so just some questions to think through. Okay. Great point, Charles. Charles says templates and examples of past documents are great for knowledge sharing. And I agree with that, especially when we have a document that's maybe a new format and we finally got approval on it. We can say, hey team, I worked on this document for this new process and I got approval on it. Here's that version. So that when your teammates have to do that same activity, they have something to start from. And it could just be a matter of putting it into your group chat or whatever communication channels you have established amongst your team. So that's very instrumental here. Thank you for that suggestion. Okay, and then lastly, knowledge application. So this is really the fruit of our labors in the knowledge management world. And if we have put in the work to create the systems that organize our information and keep us on top of current information, when it's time for us to put that knowledge to use, to apply that information, we as the user of the knowledge should have a straightforward path to locate the guidance that we need that's related to our actions and then apply that knowledge. So if we don't have these systems in place, if we don't have organization about where information is located, we are probably going to spend a lot more time than needed to locate the resources in support of doing the action we need. Or we may not know that certain information exists, and that information could have a potentially large impact on the work that we're doing. So I know from my experience, I can get really like spun up if I am trying to find one particular bit of information that I know is there, but I'm looking through a folder system and um, where I thought it would be isn't where it is, or it used to be here and now it's been moved. And so all of that time that I spend trying to locate the thing that I thought was in a particular spot is not a good use of my time. And so, but again, if we have this deliberate practice of updating everybody about changes to organization or about new processes, then we're all informed. So let's go on now and talk about some of the benefits of knowledge management. So what is in it for you? And I think that this is helpful information just to kind of have at the ready if you're trying to get an effort going amongst your peers to start one of the initiatives we're going to talk about today, like a document naming convention, for example. It's going to be helpful for you to articulate to your peers or even for yourself when you're like, this is taking too much time. I don't want to do this. You can step back and recognize what you're actually going to be getting out of it. So here's just some examples. These aren't comprehensive, but so you're going to have some improved efficiency and productivity by staying organized. You're going to have consistent quality of work because every time you're doing this process, you're referring back to the same template, to the same SOP, to the same manual reference, and you're consistently going to that guidance that is the North Star. So again, consistent quality. And then stress reduction. I know, like I just mentioned, when I'm looking for something and I have trouble finding it and things aren't adding up to what I thought it would be, then it can get frustrating. So, if you have this organizational system, you're going to have smoother workflow and less chaos. Moving on now to the right-hand side for benefits that could come to the team or division, should these practices be more widely spread, you're going to get improved collaboration. So, like I said, if you start, getting on top of regular knowledge sharing, um, um, you're going to be touching base with your teammates more frequently. And then you're going to be sharing ideas and you're going to create synergy. And when everyone has access to the same knowledge base, it's really a lot easier to work together and share your insights and ultimately achieve the goals that you have in common. You're going to have reduced redundancy. Knowledge management really helps eliminate redundant efforts by ensuring that information is reused effectively, and that once we have established a process or a means of doing work, we document it so that when there's turnover, when the person who did head up a certain process leaves the team, they don't leave with that knowledge in their brain, and nobody else has that at their fingertips. So again, we're preserving the work that we're doing today for the sake of the people who are coming behind us, as well as for our peers doing the work today. And then lastly, smoother employee onboarding. And so I know as an emerging leader, you might be saying, why would I care about, new employees? I don't hire people. But think about it. Have you ever been asked to, you know, show a new employee the ropes, to shadow them and get them up to speed with things? And so you set up some team calls and you shared your screen, or they were sitting in the cube next to you and you're just showing them the different processes, and they're looking at it saying, well, why do you do it that way? Why don't you do it this way? Or have you thought about doing X, Y, and Z? And so having these standardized processes really gives some explanation to why things are done that way. And also through the process of getting things documented, you might start questioning, like, why do we do it this way? Is there a different way to do it? And great point, Cecilia, in the chat. We've all been new employees. So you can also think about when you came on board, did you have that experience of shadowing someone and thinking like, this isn't making sense. Let's try to improve it. So this practice of knowledge management can really start getting those processes ironed out. So what can you do about this? Well, here are some steps to get yourself started. We've talked about the basics of knowledge management and its benefits, and now you are ready to take a look at what's within your area of concern that you might be able to influence or impact. So the first step here is to assess needs. Oh, sorry about that. Slide jumped ahead on me. Okay, so the first step here is to assess needs, get a lay of the land, look at all of the bodies of knowledge that you work with, see how they're already organized and what maybe some of the gaps are for how information is shared, and think about what might work, which brings us to the next step: choose the right tool. So once you have an idea, and let me pause and caveat this. It's easier to start small. So you don't have to look at every single thing that you do and try to get it all organized, next month. Start with one process. Start with one area of knowledge, one body of knowledge, and tackle that. That might just help you feel a little less overwhelmed and more like you can make some more immediate impact by starting small. So I'll say that as well. So choose the right tool. So once you know what your needs are for this particular body of knowledge or information, think about what might work for collecting that information or sharing that information. Is it a OneDrive folder for you personally? Is it a Teams channel if it's your peers that are collaborating? It could be something as simple as an Excel document on the Teams channel that helps lay out all of the different resources or where the templates are, how the folder system is lined up. So that can just collect all that information for you to share. And then next up, establish policies. So kind of create a working flow for how we share information, how we name documents, how we name folders, and who's going to be responsible for editing these as changes arise. Just getting everybody on the same page about the policies around that. And if it's just you that you are, working with, then any of those responsibilities fall on you, and the resulting organization or lack of organization is something for you to own. Next up, train yourself and your teams and make sure that everybody has the same message about what the process looks like, how you're going to go about sharing updates when they come along, for example, and then implement controls. And this is kind of the least attractive of this entire process. So it's great and exciting to get a new organizational system in place. But if time passes and there's turnover on the team and we don't hold ourselves to those rules that we established, or we don't train new employees on those rules that already exist, or we don't correct deficiencies, like somebody doesn't comply with a naming convention, for example, it's not going to be effective. So we have to, along the way, make corrections, continue to, it's like a meta-analysis of our analysis that we're doing on the knowledge, like make sure that everybody has compliance with those processes. And then lastly, continuous improvement. So if somebody new does join the team and they bring up a point about, something not making sense, hear them out, hear what they have to say. And maybe there is something that you could improve based upon that input. All right, so I see a comment from Hannah in the chat. Sometimes the answer is that our system limitations mean that we have to do it this way, even if it's not as logical or efficient, unfortunately. And I agree with that. Yes, sometimes we are handed guidance, we're handed procedures that we don't have an impact over. And, we have to just roll with it. And explaining that to new people can be challenging. But when it comes to things that are within our control, that's where we might have the ability to make continuous improvement in some of those things that we can own. But thank you for that perspective, because that's of course very valid in the environment that we work with, in the regulatory environment that many of us are in the technical world see day in and day out. Okay, so I have a couple of solutions, and these are not one size fits all. And that's the thing about knowledge management, is everybody's work is very different. And so there's no one prescriptive way that I can say, this is going to solve all of your problems with organizing your information. So that's why I provided those steps about what you can do to take a look at your workspace, how your team's already operating, where there could be some gaps. That said, I think it's also helpful to have some inspiration, to have some ideas about what this might look like in practice. So we're going to run through these 4 examples. Please, if you have questions or ideas, go ahead and put those in the chat as we go through these. Or if you've done one of these in the past, please let us know. Okay, so this is a lot of text on the screen here. I will acknowledge that, so it might be a little overwhelming. This is a sample naming convention. And the purpose of this is to get a shared drive, or even your own OneDrive, because I know I've been on my OneDrive before and I'm like, where did all this stuff come from? So that could be frustrating, and that's totally on me. So the first step with the naming convention is to select a format, and everybody agrees upon how we're going to format the documents that we save. So here is one sample, and it goes through, it kind of starts larger on the left-hand side and then goes down to some of the more nitty-gritty about the document. So we've got the project that the document's associated with, or the client ID. Then we have the document type. So is it meeting minutes? Is it a project proposal? And then we have the date that the document was, you could say this is the date it was created, for example. Then a version number. So this is version number 1 is the very first one. Version number 2 is the one that the boss has approved. And all of these things that can help differentiate what's what. And then lastly, a descriptive title. So is it an initial draft? Is it the final draft? And so having all this information outlined can help you know what's what on your shared drive. And this is not any prescriptive formatting by any means, but it's just an idea of how you can create something like this to get information organized. And so this, I'm going to send out the slides to everybody after the call today. So this will be in there if you want to study it more closely. The next suggestion is to implement version control. And I know in our digital space, it can feel like no big deal because we all have these giant OneDrives to just save a new copy of something. But sometimes that can be a little inefficient because now we have all these copies, and especially if we don't have a solid naming convention set up, we don't know which one's the newest one, which is the one that the boss has already looked at and approved. And particularly when we're going outside of our division and attaching things to emails, and that creates another copy. So on the screen here, these are some questions that you might start asking about your own processes. So when we send an email for a review on a document, are we going to send the link to the shared drive, or do they want us to download a copy and attach it to the email? Which in the attachment method is less efficient, but sometimes people prefer it that way. So just getting on the same page about what standard practice amongst your team can be really helpful. And then going on to this next section here, how will you know what stage of the review a document is in? So, and I've seen sometimes people put like a box on the document itself that's been circulating around via email, that where people will put their initials and the date that they reviewed it so that everybody knows that, oh, so-and-so has already looked at this version. So that could be a helpful technique. You could also, in SharePoint, a lot of them are set up to preserve past versions of a document so you can access all of the older versions. So that might be helpful based upon what your team's trying to accomplish. But I think what matters the most with this slide and the previous slide is that everybody involved is operating from the same set of rules, so that one person isn't creating a new copy of the document and naming it version 2, and the other person isn't just kind of saving over top of that version and just putting their initials on the bottom of the document. So then, do you see what I'm saying? Like, we need the consistency in how the process is executed. So that's what's important here. It's not one way is better than another. It's just being sure that we're being consistent. Okay, so some other suggestions, which many of you have already talked about this, is SOPs, but I really just want to call out how important and instrumental these can be when it comes to turnover. If somebody knows a process back and forth, they're the go-to on how it gets done, but then they leave the team unexpectedly, or we just didn't have an opportunity to capture their knowledge before they left, these SOPs can really save our team's efficiency. So would highly recommend that you advocate for these amongst your team for that shared knowledge purpose. And then also templates. Templates can be helpful for repetitive tasks that you are faced with, and also that the team does. And that can ensure consistency across team members, new team members. And there's actually a function within Outlook where you can create Outlook templates. And I'll link the instructions to that in the email that I send after today's class, because it's a cool tool. I wasn't so familiar with it before this, but getting ready for this class, I researched it, and I think you might find it helpful. So just something to think about. And then, so the last suggestion that I have, and this is really the culmination of all of your knowledge management efforts, is to create a knowledge map. So this is like it's meta knowledge. So it's knowledge about knowledge, and it creates a connection point for where all of the guidance is stored, where all of the folders, how they're outlined and what goes where. And you can accomplish this through a number of ways. Like I mentioned, as simple as using a Word document to create a table of contents by categories, and then create bullets underneath that for what is what and where things are stored. That can be one way. But if you want to do something more technical, we have access to a program called Visio. And so I've got a screenshot on the slide here. If you go to any VA SharePoint, you'll see these 9 dots here in the upper left-hand corner. And then you see the apps open up here. You should be able to access Visio, which is it's a visual tool. You can create flowcharts. You can create text blocks, things that just really kind of help you. You can use it like a whiteboard in essence. And so this could be a way to outline how the knowledge is saved and how it's shared, and just get one place where you can document everything and you can have it shared amongst your team. Or if it's just for your information, it can be great for you. But again, the point is, it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be like the latest and greatest technology, because we don't always have access to that anyways here at the government agency. But it's just about collecting the information and sharing it when it applies to others. So good. I'm glad to see some love for Visio in the chat. Let's see. And I see that Michael has a comment about naming conventions, that he tried to get a standard naming nomenclature started when uploading docs to your section database, but you've run into speed bumps from division heads. Okay, the story being everybody has their way of doing things. And I agree that everybody has maybe different perspectives on how things should be getting done. And it's delicate when it's your leadership that's telling you that. But, maybe if they will recognize the benefits of being consistent and having that consistency baked into the process, they might recognize that it's a benefit for everybody, even themselves, because if they're looking for a document that somebody else uploaded, there's no question about how the other person did it. It's like, well, everybody does it this way, and it's a convention because we've agreed that this is how we're going to do it. So, um, you know, I don't know if there's any opportunity for you to voice some of the information that you learned today about the benefits of knowledge management. But if you ever have that opportunity, and if it's appropriate, think about if you can share this information about the benefits. Just a thought. Always run something by your supervisor just in case. We don't want to go above the chain of command. So just want to caveat it with that. And let's wrap up with a action plan. What I would love for you to do is think about 2 specific strategies that you can implement immediately. And if that's, just for yourself, that's a great place to start. I know getting your OneDrive organized and your Outlook inbox organized is a great start. I know I created a folder system in Outlook that mirrors a folder system I have on my OneDrive, so that I have that familiarity. I know how I file things in Outlook, and the same goes for OneDrive. So if I'm saving things related to a certain project, they can go into that certain OneNote or OneDrive folder. So that might be something that works for you. But the point is, find something that you can do to apply this information. So now you've sat through this hour together, and you're taking away something that you can do. And then, define when you're going to take action, because thinking about it is one thing, but, putting pen to paper about committing to a date, about, starting to create an organizational system really helps drive that motivation. And then if the actions that you have in mind require collaboration with others, reach out, talk to some peers, see what they have in mind with their organization, and get a dialogue going. It could just be a matter of setting up a group chat and sharing your thoughts from today's class and seeing who else might have interest in starting an effort of this nature. So just some thoughts to think about. And so I think we've got about 7 minutes left together. I would love if you have any questions, you can put those in the chat. And Simone, do you think we have the capability to turn the microphones on in case people want to unmute?
Absolutely. I should have updated that function now. So if anybody wants to
Okay.
attempt that, they can raise their hand and we'll get chatting with you.
Thank you, Simone. All right. So if you have an issue or a question that you want to throw out to the group or to me, let's do some crowdsourcing. Let's problem solve together. All right, Michael, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Sure can.
Okay, and thank you for this class. It's very, very helpful. And I was just wanting to add a perspective or that I've seen from working here. I've worked for the VBA specifically for about 9.5 years. And this is a lot of good information. And as I was looking through it, it just occurred to me as I was worked here, everything, well, I can only speak for my section that everything here comes as far as policy, procedures, it always comes from a top-down perspective, whether it be regulatory or day-to-day operations. And as I was alluding to earlier, it was really hard to get this nomenclature thing pushed through because that's the stance that they took on it. Everybody done their own way or had their own way of doing things. And I noticed that, well, in my section, at least for me, that I've seen is that nobody's going to do anything unless somebody tells them to, like that. It's unless somebody with a higher pay grade says you must do it this way, then nobody's going to do it. Now they will take good ideas every now and again, but honestly, if you're looking at a division-wide policy implementation, I've seen very few people do that on their own. It's usually they'll have to be say, well, until somebody tells them to do it, they're not going to do it. I wish that
Yeah,
were. I really wish that wasn't the case, but for my section, it is.
yeah. I've been in an environment like that before and can certainly sympathize with that. I would encourage you to continue working through your own organizational capabilities, getting when you talk about, procedures coming down from outside of your area of control, which is, pretty normal in the technical world. Find a way um, uh, to organize yourself about the organization. So they update the manual, for example, but maybe you create a system where you create an index where all these topics are, and you can easily look at that index and say, okay, here's the manual reference I need to go to find this information. And start sharing tools like that with your peers and letting them see how efficient it can help them be. And maybe over time they can be swayed to get on board with something like this. And when it comes to the naming convention, um, I agree that sometimes there is that kind of top-down approach is like, well, it's not required, so I'm not going to do it. But I would just continue to encourage you to try to create relationships with your peers and see who is kind of a similar mindset with wanting to get things organized. And maybe you guys, those who are interested, can build some of that synergy and then spread that thought process throughout the team, and eventually word will get around about how great the great things that you're doing, and they might be convinced. And all you can do is try and look at what's within your area of control. So that would be my feedback for that. So
Yeah, I
thank
did
you.
get most
Yeah,
of our team to get on board with that. So
good,
most of the team's doing that,
good.
but I'm going to get this pushed through if it kills me. But thank you
Well, I
very much, ma'am,
appreciate
for
that.
your time.
I appreciate your comments. Thank you for being here today. And then I see Cecilia says she's going to finish the Director's Staff Survival Guide, which is a SharePoint architecture with folders that house links to resources for various topics and subtopics. That's fantastic. That is a great tool to share with others. So I'm really glad to hear you're putting that together and working with subject matter experts for the office to collaborate. And it's good to hear that the director's office is heading that up, because they're emphasizing the importance of this effort. So really kudos to you and your team on that. That's great to see. All right. Well, we are coming up on the top of the hour. I so appreciate everyone's time today. And if you have any additional questions, feel free to contact me. Oh, we've got one other comment here in the chat from Charles. Okay. If anyone has a solution for signatures. Okay. For routing documents that require multiple digital signatures. Interesting. Okay. Years ago in a prior organization, you could attach a PDF to a SharePoint site. When we hit the start button, the email would go to the first person in the workflow. Oh, interesting. They would select the link. It would go to the SharePoint site location of the document. They would open the document and sign it. They would close it and it would route on. Wow. Okay, that sounds like a great system of the past. I wonder, I guess that is no more. Cecilia has a suggestion to maybe look at Power Automate. That's not a process I'm familiar with, Charles, but group attendees, if you have knowledge there, please reach out to Charles or put something in the chat about that. A lot of suggestions for Power Automate here. Great. Okay, well, like Simone mentioned, we're going to have a survey for you after today's class. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have anything that I can help with. And at this time, I will hand it back to Simone.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for this excellent presentation. And thank you all for attending today. Like Elizabeth said, we would love to hear from you. So please take a moment to fill out the survey that we just put in the chat so that we can continue to improve and update our series based on your needs. This concludes our session for today. Hope to see you again soon, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks.